Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back for another week on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. So glad that you can join us this evening. Exciting week around the National Football League. I can't even believe it's been 10 weeks already. And, I'm very excited because our featured guest this week is Chris Allen from Fantasy Life. That's a newsletter, and I think he's on the NBC Peacock show as well for fantasy football. And we're so glad to have him on, and we're going to talk about that and all the big games that went on this week and who's dropping in the standings and who's moving up to contenders, pretenders. So, Chris, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing quite well, Lloyd. I appreciate you having me on. To your point, week 10, 2.5 months into the season. And I got to be honest, being on the content side of things, I almost feel like September week 1 was a lifetime ago. I mean, all the stuff that we've learned so far, the injuries, the big names that have come out of nowhere, the teams that have performed well that we thought might have had a shot, but didn't really see some of this stuff coming from, the Texans and CJ Stroud, the Ravens performing so well. I mean, just so many teams that we had questions about back in August. And now it's just like we look back on a lot of this to ask the question, how did we get here? And we still have another, 7-8 weeks of football left before we even get into the actual playoffs. So no, it's been a long road, but I'm really excited to see where this is all headed. And like I was saying, we still have just so much more football to be played, but it's exciting to really get a chance to learn about these teams week by week.
Yeah, and Chris, some of the games were real exciting, and there were 10 games that had a 8-point or less, one possession type finish, with 5 of them ending on dramatic field goals at the end. But I'll start with some of the games were a little stinker early on in the beginning of the week. In particularly, the first game, Thursday Night Football, that's got to be a tough sell for them over at Prime when you have a matchup like the Chicago Bears, who are now 3-7, over the Carolina Panthers, who were 1-8. It was 16-13. The Bears didn't cover the spread. It was only 3.5, but it was 2 rookie quarterbacks. And what did we see here? Neither offense got over 300 yards, but did you see anything in this game worth watching? I know as a fantasy footballer, there's always implications, but what else did we see Thursday night?
I think one of the biggest things that I was trying to look for in that particular game was, are we going to see anything more out of the Bears backfield? What is that rotation going to look like moving forward? And while we didn't get Khalil Herbert back, Roshan Johnson, the rookie that the Bears had drafted, we did see him get worked in a little bit more, but it's still Donta Foreman's backfield moving forward. So while I know from a fantasy standpoint, those types of 2-way or even 3-way committees are one of those big headaches, because we have so much uncertainty associated with who we're going to start week in and week out, that becomes bothersome for fantasy managers. It was actually somewhat positive to see Donta Foreman really take over the backfield, maintain the majority of the rushing share throughout the entirety of the game, and also still working in as a pass catcher as well. So while Herbert, we're assuming he's going to be back potentially next week, at least for right now, fantasy managers have at least something to rely on out of that backfield, especially with also Justin Fields also on his way back, including also from a running back perspective.
Now, so Justin Fields is going to play. I know I was talking to some folks, and the coach was kind of on the fence whether he was ready or not. But you think he's going to finally be able to play again? I know Tyson Bagent has done kind of yeoman work. He is a rookie and coming from Shepherd University. But do we think that we'll finally see Justin Fields out there?
I think so, at least from what a lot of the practice reports seem to indicate, that he's able to at least be out there practicing at least in a limited fashion. And of course, from the Bears perspective, you'd think that they'd want to get him back out there as soon as possible, because in my mind, coming into this season, a successful season for the Bears is not even playoffs, not even a positive winning record. I mean, all those things are great and all that for the franchise, but I think their biggest threshold or a positive mode for success was, do you get an answer on Justin Fields? do you have some sense of, is this a guy that you can build the franchise around? And like we are just talking, we're 10 weeks in and we still don't have an answer to that. So unless they can get him back out there, they have the confidence in the thumb injury that he sustained a few weeks ago. If they do have some confidence he can get out there, operate as like in the pocket as they wanted him, as they need him to, can they get that answer from him like over the remaining parts of the season? So without that, they're heading to the 2024 offseason with yet like more questions surrounding how, like, what types of moves they're going to make. I think coming into this season, their acquisition of DJ Moore was something that made sense at the time. Continuing to build around him and add more pass catchers, that all made sense, but still worked out as intended. So unless they see more from Fields as an legitimate pocket passer, that's where I think there's going to be more continued questions for him, despite the fact he's still on a rookie contract.
Yeah, and an interesting thing too about the Bears is, we all said, okay, maybe they're in a Caleb Williams sweepstakes, Drake May sweepstakes, but they're 3-7 now, and they're moving down the charts, and I want to talk about the teams kind of at the top there. They did beat Carolina, and Carolina, they have Bryce Young. What can we? Bryce Young. A lot of people. We talked about C.J. Stroud earlier and what he's been doing. Do we think that Bryce Young can kind of progress and kind of live up to that expectation? They made that big trade for him, and a lot of people are saying, "Wow, they should have taken Stroud."
Yeah, and I think it's easy to look at the results and say that yes, they should have taken CJ Stroud. I'm certainly, I think I am on that train as of right now, but I would say that we shouldn't go ahead and like lift up one player and say that CJ Stroud was the obvious choice while also denigrating another. Some people are on just different timelines of their progression. If you look at the coaching staff, like between the two prospects or between two rookies at this point, CJ Stroud has not just D'Amico Ryan's like a excellent like a head coach coming over from the 49ers, but also Bobby Slowick, who was like the offensive coordinator from the 49ers, like work with it like in that fashion, like behind Kyle Shanahan. So if you have like that sort of mentality, that level of experience coming from the 49ers to really help develop a quarterback versus while Frank Reich is no slouch like in that regard, but also you do have some first timers in terms of like the coaching staff that's calling plays, but also look at the support system around Bryce Young.
Yes.
I mean, Adam Thielen, who's like like into his twilight years, like as a receiver. DJ Chark hasn't been able to stay healthy and really provide an impact in the intermediate and deep parts of the field like they intended. Jonathan Mingo, the rookie that they drafted, has also taken his time like developing as well. So it's just I can't expect much because I don't know much about him. Really can't see like how has he been able to develop like given the structure around him. I would say there are some similarities between what Bryce Young is facing right now and what Justin Fields was looking at just a year ago with a number of like no name pass catchers. I would say just lesser known pass catchers or inexperienced
Right.
pass catchers that really aren't there to help elevate a quarterback or a rookie quarterback in that situation. So I think Bryce Young, like in like from a career standpoint, I think he'll be all right like in the future. It's just that the Panthers know that they need to add a bit more around him to start asking and trying to get answers of the same questions that we were just talking about for Justin Fields.
Yeah, and we're talking with Chris Allen from Fantasy Life, and so glad to have him on. We're on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. You're listening to Lloyd Mance Insider Football. Chris, one of the early games, and it was over in Germany, so a lot of people got up early like I did, and we thought, okay, maybe we'll see some fireworks. And I have Jonathan Taylor on my team, so I was excited to watch him play, but the score, the Colts win this one 10-6, and not a lot going on here. And the first thing I want to touch on when we go to this game is Mac Jones. You saw on the sidelines, right over Belichick's shoulder, he's going back and forth with Bill O'Brien. Kind of looked like an ugly situation. Is Mac Jones? I'm not going to say salvageable at this point, or where do you see his future there? I know in my past episodes, I talked to a couple other writers and people around the league, and we were all saying Belichick, Robert Kraft may be going in another direction. But let's start with Jones there with New England and then move on to Belichick.
Honestly, I thought the draft of like taking Mac Jones, especially in the class that he came out in, was questionable at best, because I think over the last like 3 or 4 seasons, the quarterback play, like the young quarterback play, has really been highlighted by not just their arm talent and their ability to execute on the field schematically or whatever the case may be, but also their ability to be mobile quarterbacks. I'm not talking about the Justin Fields, the Lamar Jacksons, or even Patrick Mahomes to an extent. But I think the Patrick Mahomes, like mentioning him, that brings up the right type of quarterback that I'm talking about, the ones that can scramble, like put Joe Burrow in that same conversation as well.
Right.
You don't have to be Josh Allen, the ones that can just take off and get you like 15, 20 yards or whatever. But if you can provide a positive play when the structure breaks down, and move the chains forward, like either by creating a first down or even just making your next down a bit more manageable, turning a 1st and 10, which would have been a sack, into, let's say, a 2nd and 6, a 2nd and 5, because you scrambled for 3, 4, 5 yards. I mean, that's really where we've seen a lot more of the quarterbacking start to advance over the last like 3 or 4 years. And so Mac Jones, while he has been capable of executing at times, we've seen him have flashes over the last few seasons. I think that hindrance, like that inability of him to really be able to create out of structure, that has been like one of his like the largest deficits. And the Patriots selecting him where they did and continuing to stick by him. I get he's on a rookie contract, but that's been like the largest problem, like, or part of his problem, like for him being the quarterback for the Patriots, and also like them not being able to add much around him. I mean, we're relying on Juju Smith-Schuster, I
Yeah.
mean, Demario Douglas, Devontae Parker when he's healthy. So while the structure around him has also failed, Mac Jones and his limitations as a passer, which we knew coming out, I mean, when he came out of college, I mean, that all just kind of creates this, I don't know, this morass of just underperformance, and a lot of people questioning Bill Belichick and, quite frankly, his entire legacy as a coach, since he hasn't had Tom Brady at his side for the past few seasons.
Yeah, and he's 17 wins away, and you start wondering, with Robert Kraft going over to Germany and sitting there, they kept going to the box, and he did not look happy watching that effort. And Indianapolis, they're an interesting side of this game because they had Anthony Richardson, and early on in the season we talked about going back. Boy, he was so exciting and everything, but I just kept saying they're running him way too much, and he's taking a lot of hits, and where do you see the Colts now? They're 5-5. The AFC is a lot tougher than NFC in terms of the slotting, so they may compete for that seventh spot. But where do we see with the Colts and Jonathan Taylor with them?
Honestly, I am more impressed with the Colts at this point. Uh, just given the coaching change, you get bring Shane Steichen over, like from the Eagles. Even in the earlier parts of the season, it was like week 2, week 3, when Anthony Richardson went out with the concussion. We saw them switch over to Gardner Minshew. I think, again, this is more me putting on like my fantasy hat than anything else, than real football hat. But the offense still operated like as we needed it to be. Like the running back one, who at the time was Zach Moss, I mean, has career highs of efficiency. Like winds up like being like essentially like their RB1 and function as that, like, until Jonathan Taylor came back. We could still rely on Michael Pittman. Josh Downs, the rookie wide receiver that they drafted, also started producing. And honestly, it was almost independent of who was under center. Of course, we would want to see Anthony Richardson there. I mean, the amount of athleticism that we saw from him, like when he was going through the combine drills, like we knew he was going to be just a force to be reckoned with. But seeing how well the Colts have still been able to function, like from an efficiency standpoint, like with Gardner Minshew under center, I would say that, I mean, hats off to Shane Steichen and the fact that he's still been able to at least keep this ship relatively well enough, like afloat so far. Like, while I'm not expecting them to get to the playoffs or anything like that, at least the whole roster like has been able to still stay competitive despite the fact they don't have their QB1.
Yeah, and staying over in the AFC now. Now, one of the interesting games I thought was, and I was surprised by this because I actually picked the Jacksonville Jaguars to win this game. They were at home. They at the time they were 6-2. I thought, okay, they're really going to establish themselves. And the Niners, got healthy, and they came in there and blew the doors off them 34-3. And we saw good Brock Purdy. You know, I think his QBR was 148.9 in this game, and he's able to just have so many weapons. What did you see when you saw this game, and some takeaways from it?
Honestly, like when I was coming into this game, I wasn't all that concerned about Brock Purdy. Like I know that he had thrown at least one interception in 3 consecutive games, like heading into that matchup, and I mean, it's just one of those things where if you see enough of a guy and you see enough of his play, and it winds up being top 5, top 6 again from a fantasy standpoint, that's what our expectation is moving forward. But sometimes that level of like the regression kind of catches up to you in a while, like after a while. And but if you look at all the other peripherals, like he was still first in expected points added per play, like heading into that game, or like on Sunday. His completion percentage over expected, he was still top 10 in that. And he was still like from a adjusted yards per down, like almost any quarterback metric. Like heading into that game against Jacksonville, he was still one of the best, if not the best, like amongst all the quarterbacks. So I wasn't all that concerned, to be quite honest. And again, we're always going to hang our hats on the fact that Kyle Shanahan has been able to develop and put up these different quarterbacks down the field, from Jimmy Garoppolo to C.J. Beathard to Nick Mullins, like for parts here and there, for spot starts here and there. I think Brock Purdy has at least been able to show he can execute that system, and especially with Deebo Samuel coming back healthy for that game, already had Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and of course Christian McCaffrey. It wasn't too surprising for me to see him come back after the week off and completely dominate the Jacksonville Jaguars defense.
Yeah, and that throw to Kittle, I mean, that broke that game over, that long 60
Yeah.
yard cheat. And he's on my team too, so I was like, yes,
Yeah, finally.
And
Yeah.
he had 3 catches in the game. You know, he started slow, and then that was a huge play. Fantasy football, real football. And then in terms of this game, on the other side of it, Trevor Lawrence, he was the number 1 overall pick, and I was just doing some research on it. You know, he had 2 interceptions and a lost fumble, and now he has 10 turnovers, and he only has 9 TDs in 9 games that he's played. So, what are we thinking when we see Trevor Lawrence? And yes, his team's winning games, but is he that guy?
Oh, I still think he's that guy. I do think that there is some, I don't know if it's play calling, structural deficiencies that are around him at this point. Because let's go back to 2022. It's they invest in not Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk. They give him that big contract, so
Yeah.
you've got him more or less like headlining the passing game. You got Evan Ingram, okay, and it works because you have a an accurate processor in Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, who's able to dice up zone coverage, and like he can play man decently, but more or less like work through zone coverage. The same thing for Evan Ingram. And let's also see what the tandem of James Robinson for a quick minute, and then like Travis Etienne take over afterwards. And in 2022, Trevor Lawrence flourished. But now in 2023, you bring in Calvin Ridley, who his average depth of target has been in the 13, 14, 15 yard range. So like intermediate to downfield type of pass catcher. But now you have him mixed with Trevor Lawrence, who has had to operate behind, let's say, a less than stellar offensive line, and that creates this type of this problem, like this area of like this disconnect between the offense. It's not for the fact that they want to try and go to him. Calvin Ridley has had at least had the majority share of the air yards throughout most of the season, battling with Christian Kirk for targets. So it's not for lack of trying. It's just now you have this mismatch between how Trevor Lawrence needs to play behind that offensive line and what he has out there in front of him. Because if Christian Kirk isn't open, if Evan Ingram isn't open in the short and intermediate parts of the field, how is he supposed to take the time in order to also now then look downfield for Calvin Ridley? I think Trevor Lawrence's time to throw is one of the highest that it's been since he's entered into the NFL. And also his pressure to sack ratio, so how long he's taken being asked to hold on to the ball, avoid pressure without taking a sack, those numbers are up as well. So I think the play calling has to really become more in sync with the pass catchers that he has in front of him. And if Calvin really wants to take off and be that wide receiver one that they traded for, they wanted to be when they signed him, there has to be just like he has to be deployed on the field that really fits to where they're at as a team right now. And I just don't think they've figured out that recipe quite yet.
Yeah, and Jacksonville is going to continue to uh, move forward. They had their bye already, and their schedule is going to be kind of favorable. They have Tennessee at Houston, which should be a good shootout game, Cincinnati, and then at Cleveland. So, we'll see how they go from there. And then in terms of teams that were on a bye, I know this was a big week to have a couple explosive teams fantasy wise on a bye. The Philadelphia Eagles, where I'm based here in Philadelphia, everybody wants to know, AJ Brown who is AJ Brown the top guy, or is it Tyreek Hill right now? I mean, both of them look like they have a chance to break Calvin Ridley's record of 1,900 and some change, and in a single season record. But which receiver would you favor there?
Man, that's a tough question. And see, how am I supposed to say Tyreek Hill talking to the man from Philly? I feel like I would get the tomatoes thrown my way if I don't say AJ Brown. But at least I'll say this. There I think there are just like 2 or 3 there are 4 or 5 receivers right now with over a 30+% target share on their own team. It's AJ Brown, it's Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, like Stephon Diggs. I mean, like the alphas, right, of the entire league. But from an efficiency standpoint, there's an even smaller list of guys that have been able to create and be like those efficient wide receivers and have not targets per route run, yards per route run, over 3 yards per route run. Like, which is, I mean, if you're over 2, you're already talking about like high level, like high end, like type of receiver. Like I think right now, like Jamar Chase just shits like right over like 2.2 yards per route run, like on the season. AJ Brown is like right over 3. Like it's him and Tyreek Hill. Like those are like the 2 guys that are just like the elite of the elites. So if you want to talk about like the big name guys in the league, I mean, of course, like Stephon Diggs is up there, Keenan Allen, especially with his massive day he just had yesterday. All those guys are going to be up there. But I mean, you want to talk about a grown ass man. I mean, AJ, that is AJ Brown, like to a T. Like the number of times where, I mean, Jalen Hurts has just like looked downfield. I think he's looked actually to the boundary more often than attacking the middle of the field than he did in 2022. But with how successful AJ Brown has been in terms of beating man coverage and be able to win in contested catch situations, I mean, of course, I'll give it to Tyreek Hill. I mean, the man is like clearly like shattering records. His efficiency has also been off the charts. I mean, if he's not beating double coverage for a touchdown like every single week, he's just like taking a slant like to the house, or like a 5-10 yard route. It's actually like 10 to 15 since he gets down there so quickly, and he's off to the races. I do think that he deserves to be in that conversation as well. But speaking to a Philly man, I will say that you have to give AJ Brown his flowers, because I think given the fact that we came into this season thinking it's AJ Brown and Devonta Smith with Dallas Goedert, like kind of on the side, it was that trio right there. AJ Brown has really separated himself like as the wide receiver. Ain't no 1A, 1B type situation with him and Devonta Smith. Good receiver. No hate to the Slim Reaper at all. But I think like AJ Brown has cemented himself as the wide receiver 1 this season for sure.
Yeah, and I know our producer Angel would. He really wants to know about Jalen Hurts. Everybody's saying about, can Jalen Hurts become that? I think he's top 5 in terms of all-around play, but in terms of pocket passing and driving the football down the field, can he jump to that echelon and compete with a Burrow, Mahomes in terms of his passing?
I think he's already done it, to be quite honest. It's just that this is not an offense that requires him to do that. When you already have like a built-in play, are you a brotherly shove or tush push guy? Like, which one do you?
All my relatives who are season ticket holders, they say brotherly shove. That's what they say.
That's what they okay. The brother. All right, I'll keep it. I'll keep it clear. I'll try and keep it the same. I go either way, but when you already have a built-in play with a 95-ish% success rate that can move the pocket and actually get you 3 or 4 yards almost automatically. I think that what they had just like the one fumble or something like that. I
Yeah.
think there's been like one time like where that play hasn't worked. Then playing the play style that a Joe Burrow has to play in order to move his team down the field, playing the way that a Patrick Mahomes has to play to move his team down the field. He's just not asked to do it the same way because he doesn't have to. I mean, like fortunately for him, he does have a future Hall of Famer center in Jason Kelsey, like right up in front of him. He has All Pro tackle or Lane Johnson, a Pro Bowl guard. I mean, it's just like you've got juggernauts like standing in front of you. And also when you're also when like Jalen Hurts himself, I mean, brother can like lift 600 pounds. He can squat 600 pounds. I mean,
Yeah.
the man can move piles like on his own. So I think that stylistically, it's hard to compare those guys because again, he doesn't have to operate that way. But it's not to say that he can't be the same type of passer as those guys, because from a statistical standpoint, he already kind of is in that echelon. I mean, from a completion percentage over expected, I think he's around like 7%, 8%, which runs alongside some of the top passers in the league so far. I mean, this is also with the fact that he's been playing on a bum knee for the past 2 or 3 weeks as well. So if I had to pick off the top of my head, like the number of guys that I would want in like, let's say fourth quarter, 2 minutes, you need to drive down the field in order to win the game. Of course, you would list off the, Josh Allen's, the Joe Burrows, the Patrick Mahomes. I mean, throw Lamar in there as well, of course. I mean, but Jalen Hurts, he's definitely a part of the conversation. He has to be a part of the conversation because for him to achieve like what he's had like in the past couple of seasons, and I get it, he does have high end talent around him. But to see him also excel as a passer, not just as the mobile quarterback that he is, but also as a legitimate pocket passer over the past couple of seasons, I do think that he has to be in that top 5, top 6 discussion for sure.
Yeah, that's great. And we're talking with Chris Allen from Fantasy Life. Check his stuff out I always say Twitter, but it's X
Yeah.
at MB Fantasy Life. And he has his own handle at Chris Allen FFWX. It's a mouthful. On X, and we're so glad to have him here on the Low Advanced Insider Football Show on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. I know he has to run soon, so I'll get you out on this. CJ Stroud, everybody is wondering, can this rookie jump into the MVP race? I mean, yesterday's game was incredible. Yeah, a lot of people are saying if Tyler Boyd catches that ball and they get the touchdown, but instead of the field goal there. But the excitement and the way he was able to drive his team back down, I think he only has 2 interceptions this season. So cool, calm young man. What do you think is CJ Stroud, and can he get in the MVP race?
Oh, I think he should be in the MVP race, like if he's not already. I mean, what that kid is doing is just nothing short of spectacular. I mean, it's unprecedented. What it was the not last week, with the week beforehand when he shattered the record for single game passing yards, like for a rookie quarterback. Like right now, like his passing success rate. So that's not just the explosives. The passes downfield, but passing success rate looks at your down to down efficiency. Are you creating a positive play by expected points added? Like what that percentage is. And he currently sits at 14th, and that's ahead of, I mean, some of the guys that we can like typically consider to be in like the top 12, top 16 type conversation, whether it's been Matthew Stafford. I mean, Joe Burrow, even though the first month of the season, Burrow was playing on like a hobbled leg. He's right behind like Jalen Hurts. So it's like some of those like the pocket passers that we would consider to be elite. CJ Stroud is already like kind of matching them or coming up like, up to their shoulders in terms of his passing efficiency. And there's nothing that a defense has been able to throw at him that's had him rattled. I mean, sure that he threw the interception yesterday against the Bengals, had the fumble, if I'm remembering correctly, as well. But overall, they were just drive after drive after drive, just walking the Bengals defense down the field. And that was without Nico Collins, his wide receiver one, on the field, having the backup running back. They didn't have Dameon Pierce on the field, had Devin Singletary in there as well. So just that again, going back to the structure, You've got Bobby Sloak, you got D'Amico Ryans, the guys from the 49ers there to help him develop. Even with what we would consider to be lesser supporting cast compared to what other quarterbacks currently have, they're still able to make it work from a yards per drive standpoint, efficiency standpoint. I mean, the kid is making magic there on the field. So I just thought it was, I mean, a hell of a performance by him. And there's really nothing fluky about what he's doing that we shouldn't expect to see that continue for him to happen for him moving forward, if not for this season, but for the remainder of his career.
That's great stuff. I mean, I can listen to Chris all day. I mean, he knows. He says fantasy football. He knows real football. He sounds like one of those guys. I met a guy in one of the front office. He's one of those analytics guys, and every team has 2, 3, 4 of those guys now. And you know how to have stats. You got the knowledge too. So I really appreciate Chris Allen coming on again. Check out his stuff at Fantasy Life, and I really enjoyed reading up on you. And next time you come on, you'll have to tell me about the cookout group. That sounds interesting. I know one of the big things is talking trash in fantasy, and now I'm in a league with my sons, so I have fun going back and forth with them and their friends, and it just keeps you just don't root for the laundry. You know what I mean? You have a lot of people around the league, and it just makes the excitement even more fun around all the games.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, since you brought it up, I'll talk about it real quick because working in this industry, we have so few opportunities to talk with folks from diverse backgrounds, like whether African American, Hispanic, like whatever the case may be. And the Cookout Group like really hopes to we're trying to push that diversification forward. We're trying to make sure that in this industry, whether you're fantasy football, real football, like on camera, behind the scenes, it really doesn't matter. But those types of opportunities are given to more folks that have those types of backgrounds that actually work and live in those come from different cultures. And so I've been fortunate enough to come across a number of other like-minded content creators that really want to see that type of industry like in the future. So that's what we're trying to build at the Cookout Group.
Oh, great.
I mean, so it's been a wonderful experience so far. We're partnering with the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association to really try and help build this and bring more awareness to the diversification of the industry moving forward. So hopefully over the next 6 months, year or so, we'll start to grow and bring some more people into it. But it's been I feel really blessed to be able to work with these type of people and partner up with them and hopefully make a change for the better.
Great. All right, Chris. Well, I appreciate you giving us an amount of time, and we'll talk to you down the line, and I'll have more questions for you. I'm sure there are people stopping in the grocery store. Everybody has a fantasy football team, even the grandmothers. So thanks for joining us here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game and Broad Street South Network.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right. And now we'll keep moving along here on Insider Football and lots of games to get to and performances, and a couple of the games really jumped out with me. I don't know if Ryan's going to jump in here, Angel, if you can bring him in, and Chris can. I know he's probably got some things to do. So as we look at one of the games that I didn't get to talk with Chris about, but the Pittsburgh Steelers are now 6-3. They won ugly. We'll say no style points as usual. They won over the Green Bay Packers 23-19. The Steelers came in there as a 3-point favorite, so they barely cover, and the over-under was 39, so there's 42 points total in this game. And once again, it was the Steelers and their defense that carried the day. TJ Watt is just having a tremendous season. He has 10.5 sacks on the season now. He's second in the NFL. He had a sack in the game, and he now passed his brother on the quickest list in terms of in their first few seasons. He has 88 sacks there. Second only to Reggie White, obviously, who had 105 at the beginning of his career in his first 5 seasons or so. So TJ Watt was dominant in this one. And something else that jumped out to me was the play of Jaylen Warren. Now, it seems like the Steelers have kind of moved on in terms of saying, yes, Najee Harris has to be the guy that carries the mail over and over for them. And now they've kind of incorporated Jalen Harris, and he has a higher yards per carry than Najee Harris. They bring in Najee Harris closer to the goal line. He does have a few touchdowns in the red zone, but in terms of down and distance, overall play, Jalen Warren is moving the chains. He has a 4.7 yards per carry, and then Najee Harris is around the 3-yard range. So you can't blame Mike Tomlin for going with Jalen Warren in terms of moving the chains. But kind of, again, another pedestrian performance, I thought, by the quarterback. He's just Pickett is not. He's not driving the football down the field with consistency. Yes, like we just talked about, Chris Allen. Not a lot of weapons on some of these teams, and the Steelers they do have some guys here and there, but Deontay Johnson only had one catch for 17 yards in this one, and Pickens did get a few catches to kind of quiet the pebble that's been in Mike Tomlin's shoe, and you wonder if the Steelers are going to be able to keep this up, as they are at the top of the AFC North, and this division is extremely jumbled, and we'll get to another game in a second with the Ravens and the Cleveland Browns. That was an exciting one to talk about. But the Steelers, when I look at them, they have to be able to have just more consistency. They're winning these games unbelievable. Miss Minka Fitzpatrick, they're all pro safety in the back end. But they do have some tougher games coming up. They're at Cleveland this week in week 11. Then they're at Cincinnati week 12. Arizona, which is a winnable game. New England at the Colts. Cincinnati again at Seattle, and at the Ravens to close the season. So Angel jumped in here, and Angel, when you look at that AFC North, very jumbled division. That some were saying all 4 teams could possibly make it. We'll see. That's never been done before, but I think 3 may be realistically. The AFC North is now, you have the Ravens at the top at 7-3, Steelers at 6-3, Browns at 6-3, and the Bengals at 5-4. So, when you look at the AFC North, do you see this division kind of shaking out, or I picked the Ravens. I'll stick with them to win the division. But what are you seeing when you look at the AFC North?
I think it'd be interesting to say that if, and a strong if, the Ravens can continue to win this division, because somehow or another Mike Tomlin has kept this team in there. I don't know how he's done it, honestly, but they're in second place at 6-3. They've been able to do so. Look at Mike Tomlin last year. I mean, everybody thought he was going to end up losing his job, and somehow or another turned it around. Ravens getting beat by the Browns. And, could the Ravens still win a division? Yeah. Could the Steelers possibly steal it? Sure. Cincinnati, by all means, not out of it. They lost a tough one yesterday. But, I guess to echo what you're saying, too, with the AFC North, is it also possibly one of the better divisions in the NFL right now, because they are keeping it as tight as they possibly can. And we saw Cincinnati start out, 1-3? 1-3 in a row.
Yeah.
And now at 5-4, like I said, just that loss there. But I mean, I don't know what Mike Tomlin's doing year in, year out. Somehow or another, he hangs on with the Steelers. The Ravens and the loss yesterday to the Browns, I'm still kind of iffy if they win a division. They can, if I don't have to say they have to win outright all the way out, but I think they can do it. I believe in what you're saying.
Yeah, and get back to her, because how great was Chris Allen? I mean, you could listen to him all day. I know some people are like, it's fake football and everything, but he had all the metrics in it. He talked, QB1, QB2, and yards per attempt and all that fun stuff. And a lot of the old, I still talk to some of the scouts, and they're the eyeball test guy. They said, "Oh, my eyes tell me all I need to know." But sometimes these stats really don't lie, and it was great listening to him. And do you play fantasy football, Angel?
So I think this year might be the first year I haven't played because of how crazy my schedule is.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, but I haven't played. Usually Fuji, who used to be on with us, I know he gets into like 3 or 4 leagues throughout the season to the point
wow.
where he drives himself nuts. But no, with Chris, same thing. I mean, listen to him in the background there in the green room. I everything he was saying, you would never tell honestly that it's fantasy because the way he speaks, it's just like having another insider like yourself, where you guys are are going toe to toe with the matchups. So yeah, he's great.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the playoff picture, and these teams, we can. I feel like sometimes like everybody already rehashed the game, so we'll look at the playoff picture, and one of the fun things I had fun listening to him about was talking about the Eagles and Jalen Hurts. I know they were on a bye this week, but the big game's coming up this week, and in Week 11, everybody's really looking forward to it. It's Monday Night Football. The Eagles in a Super Bowl matchup. They're 8-1, and they're going to Kansas City, and both these teams are going to be rested and ready to go. And when we look at the playoff picture, the Eagles right now would have the number 1 seed, and then right behind them, we'll get to that game in a minute, but right behind them is the Detroit Lions. I mean, what a pinball machine. I really, if we could have Chris along, I would have asked him about this game. But Detroit, what a pinball machine game by them. They pull it out, huge victory. They go out to LA, and this is a dangerous team. They're 7-2, and the Eagles, we know they got this tough stretch coming out at KC, Buffalo, San Francisco, at Dallas, at Seattle. So they may have a stumble here, and then you could be looking at the road in that conference going through the Detroit Lions. So what are you seeing when you look at the Detroit Lions, and how about that win by them? And then we can get to the other side of it, the Chargers, which you're talking about a coach on a hot seat. I think Staley's one of those guys.
Yeah. And I'm kind of surprised, truthfully, it being Monday, especially when things are happening on Mondays, where it could easily be where he could have lost his job. How he's hanging in there so far is beyond me after a loss yesterday. But Detroit right now is getting to be scary in a good way. Scary good, I guess the way it's said. But Detroit is right now making a good case to make it to the NFC Championship game. With the Eagles taking on Kansas City, it's worrisome because the Eagles' schedule isn't getting easier. Same thing like when it comes to Detroit. So they're going to be battle tested going all the way into their playoffs. But Detroit right now, Jared Goff, listen, Minnesota, I think if Kirk Cousins didn't go down, it might have been a whole different story. Dobbs right now doing well for him in that division. But I think Detroit right now could be at that NFC Championship game. I would say if the season ended right now, easily could be there. And if the Eagles don't watch out, the Detroit Lions could end up taking over that number 1 spot.
Yeah, and the thing about them is, and Chris talked about, they're just explosive all over. They have 2 good running backs, Montgomery and Gibbs. Then they have Laporta at the tight end position, and Goff, who a guy I'm not going to lie to you, I killed him over the years, especially when he played in that Super Bowl for the Rams, and they lose, what was it, 10-3? He didn't put any points up in the Super Bowl, and everybody is saying, oh, this guy can't get it done. But he's able to sling the football down the field, and he's feeling extremely comfortable there. Dan Campbell doing a great job in terms of just rallying that team, and the team members, you can see they fight for each other. It's almost like a family, And then they had Ben Johnson do a great job designing plays, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I give my game ball every week. He had that big homecoming win over the Chargers, 41-38, and he's from USC. 8 receptions, 9 targets, 156 yards, a huge 20-yard TD that turned that game. And you're right, he's the cog that makes this team go. Him and Goff have such a great connection, and this Lions team is extremely dangerous. And then we talk about the schedule, Angel. The schedule is extremely favorable for them, and I think this is going to help them. They have Chicago this week. They have Green Bay, at New Orleans, at Chicago, Denver, at Minnesota, who we know Minnesota's making a mini comeback, at Dallas, who I want to get to next with you, Minnesota, and that's it. So, some
Yeah.
winnable games for Detroit.
It is very winnable. I mean, you're talking about other than maybe Dallas, and if Minnesota can pull off an upset, but yeah, very winnable where they can make a good run because again, the Eagles' schedule, and I'm pretty sure you get into a little bit later on, it's not favorable for the Eagles whatsoever. So you have to look out, and I can't wait to talk about this Dallas game because one wide receiver talked about that he's the best in the league, and that drove me nuts.
Yeah, how about Dallas? I was on with our buddy Rich Keone today on his show Back Your Play, and we were just talking about Dallas when they get a wounded animal, they just stomp on somebody. And you think, okay, take your foot off the gas. We know you're better than the poor Giants. The Giants are now 2-8, and they've just been destroyed over and over again by Dallas. And Dallas was a 17-point favorite, and they covered this easily, winning 49-17. They're getting Cooper Rush out there, the backup quarterback, and he's yucking it up. And Brandon Cooks finally has a big day, and you're right. And I always say to you and everybody else, Dallas is the paper champion.
Yep.
They win games that they should, and then the tougher ones they don't get the job done. So what did you see when you saw this 49-17 win? Yes, CeeDee Lamb had a great game and everything, and I'm sure all the metrics that like Chris and these fantasy football guys talk about, he is up there, but he's no Justin Jefferson. He's no A.J. Brown and Devontae Adams. And this whole pound in my chest, I'm the greatest ever. Good for him. But Muhammad Ali, enough already.
Exactly. And CeeDee Lamb, for him to say that he was, he's the best wide receiver in the NFL, listen, cool it, buddy. If Ryan and I talked about it, Martinez and Company on Tony's network, and what cracks me up is that if you want to say I'm one of many, I'm one of the best wide receivers, not saying you are the best. First of all, you beat the Giants. Come on. Who are we kidding? You should have beat the Giants. But in the first quarter, let's remember, Dallas was having a tough time trying to score on the Giants. It was 0 score until the second started pumping around, and obviously the second half. But I think it's just ridiculous for what Dallas has done. I don't. If anybody says they're going to the AFC Championship game, you guys better wake up because that Cinderella story is not happening. When y'all need to see Dak step up, he steps up on teams, obviously, that he needs to beat up on. The first time around with the Giants, obviously it was a shutout. This time around, 49-17. So do I expect for Dallas to have beaten the Giants? Of course. The Giants beat the Giants for the most part. At 2-8, I mean, it's ridiculous. They're just as bad as obviously the Patriots. But for me, for CeeDee Lamb, it just me personally as a fan, and obviously for the Eagles, don't say you're at the top, you're the elite, when there's many other top wide receivers that are just a tad bit better than you.
Yeah, and when Dallas, obviously, we're going to get our answers at the end of the season, and it is playoffs or bust for this team. And Jerry Jones, obviously, he wants a championship. He's at a certain age, and he wants that championship for too long. And Dak is playing extremely well these last couple games. We'll give him his props. He's had 12 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, like the last 4 games, and he is a guy that he's actually started to run some more. But as you were saying, Angel, are we getting a true picture of them when we look at their schedule and who they've beaten at the Giants? They beat the Jets. We can talk about that in a minute. At Arizona, which they lost, which was crazy. New England. They lose at San Francisco. They beat the Chargers, who we just talked about. I was just crunching numbers on them. Brandon Staley is probably, this will be his last season there. His team is 14-15 in 1-score games, the Chargers. They just can't get it done. Dallas had their bye, then they beat the Rams. Obviously, they have not been the same since they've had Matthew Stafford. Lose to Philly. They beat the Giants, and it's only going to get crazier, Angel, because they're at Carolina this week, and they're just going to they're going to pour it on. So if you do have fantasy football Cowboys, I would load up on them because they're playing poor Carolina. They have Washington, Seattle. Then they finally December 10th is a game all my Eagles relatives have pointed to. They're going to be here. They'll be in the Jerry Dome in the rematch against Philly. And then Dallas has at Buffalo, at Miami, Detroit, and then at Washington to close it out. So they do have a mix of close games and tough games, winnable ones there. Now, right now, Dallas is in the 6th spot. So, they'll have to keep going. And we know the Eagles in the number 1 spot and the 1st spot in the NFC East. No team has repeated in the NFC East since the 03-04 Eagles. So it would be interesting. I do think that they're going to win this division for the second year in a row, which would change that whole dynamic in the NFC East. The team right now at number 7 in the NFC, Angel, I wanted to ask you about the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this is a team, I think they definitely started 0-2. And they're currently on a 5-game win streak. And now they have Joshua Dobbs, who was off the scrap heap. They got him in a trade. They traded a 6th-round pick to get him, and then that was to the Cardinals. And then the Vikings got Dobbs and a 7th-rounder back. So it was basically just a swap, and they got Dobbs. And the Cardinals, we knew, were done with him. And, it's just been incredible. They don't have – everybody keeps saying that the DB from the Bills that DeMar Hamlin almost passed away on the field. He's going to be a comeback player of the year. But, in terms of you got to put Josh Dobbs in that mix as comeback player of the year as well.
You have to. And if you don't, then there is a problem. Just like C.J. Stroud should be looking at MVP. It's early on, but he should. But no, Dobbs, obviously the injury to the backup quarterback puts Dobbs in there. Dobbs ended up winning the game last week, gets the game ball. He gets the nod again this week to be able to play, pulls off another victory for Minnesota over New Orleans, which New Orleans is having their issues as well. But to me, Josh Dobbs should be the comeback player. The kid, whatever it is that he is taking, and I know some people out there are drinking the haterade because I'm pretty sure they're going to hate on what he's doing, and they shouldn't because he's playing well. Now, is it going to be one of those, Purdy situations in San Fran that when Kirk Cousins is healthy, he's going to take over? No, everybody knows Kirk Cousins is going to remain the starting quarterback. But Dobbs and what he's asked to do from Minnesota and to be able to keep this team right now in the mix, like you said, it's a 5-game win streak, 6-4 right behind Detroit. And who knows what can happen in that division? Could Detroit, with the schedule they have, it's winnable. They could take it. But it doesn't mean that every team like Miami can beat teams over 500. So I think Dobbs is doing a fantastic job right now for Minnesota 2 weeks in a row. I would believe he will get the nod for the 3rd week in a row. And who's to say that if things are going the way they're going, Lance, do they keep him? Do they keep him until the end of the season, just a regular season?
Yeah, well, they're going to keep him, and Kirk Cousins he's on a 1-year deal this year, so they need to re-sign him. Everybody I've talked to said that the Vikings are now deciding, we probably should bring him back, even though he has that Achilles. Let him heal up and then go from there. But Josh Dobbs, I believe they have him under contract going into next season as well. But they would probably need, if he's playing as well as he is, Angel, they're probably going to need to talk to his agent and do a restructure, right. Slide some money forward and give him an opportunity.
But look, here's a question for you. So Dobbs right now, obviously it's to the end of the year when it comes to Minnesota, there are teams that are going to be looking, i.e. Patriots and others, going to be looking for a starting quarterback. Can Dobbs get to that point where he can be the starting quarterback for a team in desperate need come next season?
Oh, no doubt. I think he definitely could start for a team. You look at what Indianapolis is doing this season with mostly Gardner Minshew, a guy like that, and Josh Dobbs. The way he's played, he should get his opportunity to start. Look at where you are down there in Tampa. Baker Mayfield, I think this is his 4th team or so, and he's finally starting to. I'm not ready to jump on a bandwagon because it'll probably have a broken wheel before I know it. But Baker Mayfield, he played extremely well yesterday, and his numbers are bearing out the fact that that he still can be a starting quarterback in this league. And I could see Josh Dobbs getting the same opportunity. And the thing, Angel, that he does so well is he's able to move the chains as needed, like Chris was talking about with these dual threat quarterbacks. That's what he's doing. You know, he had 44 yards rushing yesterday and one touchdown rushing the ball. And he showed that he was efficient. And then it showed you against the Saints defense that was pretty tough coming in, that he could play against anybody. So it was a good win for the Vikings. And yeah, Josh Dobbs is a guy who's, it's a great story. It's a fun story because he's such a journeyman. I remember when the Steelers drafted him coming out of Tennessee, and you know, he was going to be Big Ben's developmental type quarterback and not much more after that. But he's bounced around and he's finally found a home now. One quarterback we got to talk about is the comeback of Kyler Murray. He was able to come in and you know, I know it's against the Falcons, and everybody's like, "Oh, who cares, Lloyd? You know, got two bad teams." But you know, he did a nice job coming in here and leading his team to a last second field goal. Matt Prater kicked 4 kicks, and 2 of them were over 50 yards, including the game winner. So, what did you see from Kyler Murray in this one?
It was good to see him back out in the field. To come back, obviously, to win a game, and like you said, it's against Atlanta. But Atlanta started out. Didn't Atlanta start at 3-0 this season, and then we saw the fallback, which none of us saw that coming.
There were 6 teams that started 2-0 to begin the season, and when you start 2-0, I think you have, probably about 60% chance of making the playoffs. So, and in 2022, there were 6 teams that started 2-0. They all made the playoffs. Now this year is going to be interesting. Here were the teams that started 2-0. Dallas, San Francisco, Atlanta, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Washington, Miami, Tampa Bay, New Orleans. So, you know, some of them, I just don't see them making the playoffs. Obviously, Atlanta would be one of them. Desmond Ridder came in there, did a nice job. Heineke goes out with the hamstring. But that team is struggling. I think it was funny because Arthur Smith finally started giving the ball to Bijan and Robinson and stopped trying to give it to Algier. And, you know, you draft a guy in the first round, why not use him? So they started using him even more. Washington, you know, Hal had some very nice numbers in his game, but they're another inconsistent team. They're at 4-6, and you wonder where they're going. Ron Rivera, another coach on the hot seat. And then we talk about Miami. Tampa Bay, I think Tampa Bay and New Orleans are going to be in that mix for their divisional championship, which, you know, that's going to be the Little Sisters of the Poor championship, the NFC South. One of them's got to go. You know, last year we saw the Bucks get in last year at 8-9. When you look at the NFC South, which team do you see can make the playoffs?
Well, it's funny how you talk about those records there at the beginning of the season, how much things have changed just a few weeks later. But you got what? New Orleans at 5-5, Tampa at 4-5, finally stopped that skid. Atlanta at 4-5, and then Carolina at what, 1-8?
Yeah, so Carolina, we could say, all right, we're pretty sure they're not going to win that division.
No. If I had to go with 1 of the 2 between Tampa and New Orleans right now not playing very New Orleans-esque as we've seen in the last several years. Tampa Bay, I think if this defense can stop playing cushion defense, you know, the cushion kind of pillow defense, they would be better. I mean, we saw what just 2 weeks ago in Tampa Bay, even in this game, matter of fact, yesterday, where it's been one of the harder teams to score in the red zone. So I think if it comes down from the NFC South, I can see Tampa squeezing out over New Orleans, even though New Orleans right now is at even 500, 5-5. But I can see Tampa Bay possibly taking that division.
Yeah, and the thing is with New Orleans, you know, they're wildly inconsistent as well. Derek Carr is a guy you're like, oh, he can frustrate the mess out of you. And they've been leaning on Taysom Hill so much, and he didn't have a really big week this week rushing the football and you know, the gadget plays that he was doing. Right now, at the playoffs start today, New Orleans be the number 4 seed. They're 5-5, as you said. They're going on their bye. Maybe they can clean some things up there. They did have Jameis Winston come in, and you know from his Tampa days, he did Jameis type things. He he had some touchdowns, he had some interceptions, and he had some throws where you're like, oh no, 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 But he tries to trust his arm way too much, but New Orleans, we'll see. Looking at their schedule, after they're by, they're at Atlanta, which will help sort this thing out. Then they have Detroit. That'll really tell us if they're a contender or pretender. They have Carolina, the Giants, at the Rams, and they're at Tampa Bay, which is interesting, and then they have Atlanta to close it out. So they have a lot of divisional games left to play, and we're really going to see if the Saints team could step up. Now, big thing, Angel, I know, we all watch the police blotter sometimes, unfortunately, with these athletes. Did you hear with Michael Thomas? He threw a brick or something at somebody today. Did you hear about that?
No,
the
receiver, I missed that one.
Yeah, the receiver for the Saints. He got in some trouble, I guess, with a contractor or somebody at his house, and it was all over the news this morning. So,
and New Orleans right now does not need anything else to really spot the mess that they've become, and kind of surprising for Michael Thomas, because normally, if I remember correctly, you normally don't hear much of anything other than him on the field, but off the field, next to nothing.
Yeah, and he's usually hurt, so he hasn't played in like 2-3 years. But he's out there and giving it a go, and they have Chris Olave's done a nice job for them, and that was a game that was close and it was winnable, but they just couldn't get it done. And particularly their defense has done a nice job. They haven't allowed a 300-yard passer all season. So New Orleans is a team we definitely have to keep our eye on. Before we get to next week, let's take a look at a couple other these games. Seattle was at home. They're 6-3 now. They won over the Washington Commanders, who are 4-6, 29-26. It was a close game. Geno Smith had some nice throws in this game and leads his team back. Probably too many field goals once again, but a big win for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah. Which schedule you're talking about here again?
Yeah, the Seattle Seahawks. They did a nice job beating the Washington Commanders, and they're right now. I think they're leading the NFC West by strength of schedule or something like that over San Francisco. Now, the interesting thing with the Seahawks is they're going to play. They have near the end of their season, they have a tough road. So they still have to play the Niners.
Okay.
All right. I think they play the Niners coming up. Oh no, coming up they're at the Rams this week.
That's a winnable game.
Yeah, that's a winnable game for the Seahawks. But when you look at the Seahawks, their schedule, so they're at the Rams, then they host the Niners in week 12, which is a huge game. They're at Dallas, at San Francisco, then they have Philly in week 15, at Tennessee. Then they have Steelers in week 17, and then they're at Arizona to end it. So we're really going to find out, whether Seattle is a team that's ready to go. Now, they did make a trade for Leonard Williams. That defense has got to do a better job because they were able to move that football up and down the field on them. They do have a nice secondary there with Woolen and Witherspoon back there. But Jamal Adams, a guy who they traded for from the Jets, they gave a ransom for him, and he just has not worked out. He's often injured and has a lot of penalties and a lot of coverage lapses. So Seattle, a team to keep your eye on, and as we move on, we'll kind of keep going from there. Now, all right, jump into we have 10 minutes left. We'll jump to week 11. Another one with more buys. All the buys will go into week 13, and then finally we can all relax and everybody will have their day off and all that. And it was interesting. I was talking with a coach friend, and some coaches keep their players in town. Some of them give them the whole week off, but it's a mix. You know what I mean? Sometimes some of these coaches want to have the iron fist and keep those guys in town and keep an eye on them. And unfortunately, we talked about the police blotter. You can't, I'll say they're used to being on agenda, some of these players, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're used to
No,
having practice at a certain time and everything, and sometimes free time gits in the way.
yep. Now, the
So
one thing I wanted to bring up real quick is you talked about Michael Thomas, and I don't know if you caught this one. This, and sometimes people and their humor stuff. So obviously we know that Kelly Oubre Jr. was hit in Philly on Saturday by a car. Did you happen to catch? And I don't know how in the world the news station didn't pick up on this, but NBC, I think it was like NBC4, somewhere out in the middle part of the state there. The guy comes on and he says, we do have a sketch of the person who hit Kelly. And someone sketched James Harden in a black and white picture. And the guy looked back like, is this real? And it was James Harden. Like, and the guy didn't know what to say. He knew who he looked like. He was like, I think we have the wrong picture. I just thought it was hilarious that someone put it on air and it was like, okay,
Yeah.
James.
You got to be careful with the catfishing and stuff. And we all know on X and all this, everybody wants to be an Insta reporter and social media. Angel, it's funny. I have a buddy. He always tries to get me. He's like, oh, they made a trade in the NFL and da-da-da. I was like, you're not going to get me. I said, I get all the alerts and everything from around the league. I know exactly who's trading whom and who was hurt and all that. But yeah, definitely a lot of people try to catfish and punk people and prank them. And yeah, it's funny. In school, journalism school, they always say, check your resources, check them twice. And, your sources, all your sources. I guess that station didn't.
Not at all.
But that doesn't happen here at 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. We check all our stuff.
Sure do. That's sure.
So in terms of the bye, the Falcons will be off, the Colts will be off, the Patriots. So those two teams are in Germany, and then the Saints. Big Thursday night football game. Now this is an interesting one. You have both these teams lost this week, and they're going to come in angry, a little injured, particularly Baltimore. So you have the Cincinnati Bengals, who we talked about C.J. Stroud and that great comeback that they had in Cincinnati to win that game. They are at Baltimore on Thursday night, NFL Prime. The Ravens, they're already talking about practice schedules and whether Ronnie Stanley, their great offensive tackle, who has a knee injury, and Humphrey, their cornerback, who also has a leg injury, if they're going to play in this one. But when I look at this one, the Ravens defense got to show up better than they did yesterday. They had that huge lead on Cleveland, and then they allowed Deshaun Watson to kind of lead them back and take over this game. And I know Joe Burrow is going to come in there mad. He was a little off when I watched that game against the Texans. Some of his throws were errant. So I will go with the Ravens, and it's only because of their defense. I think they're going to be able to get pressure on Joe Burrow. That offensive line's a little shaky for the Bengals, and I think the Ravens will win this one at a close one.
I think Joey Burrow and crew want to keep pace with the Baltimore Ravens. So for me, I will take Joe and the Bengals on this one, and it might just come down to a field goal.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. I'll try to another good one. The Tampa Bay Bucks, who we talked about, they finally ended their losing streak, and Baker looked more efficient with the football, getting it to Mike Evans and Godwin and the guys. They're going to travel out west as they go, and they're going to face a very tough Niners team who looks like they're clicking on all cylinders. You have Chase Young on that defense now. He had half a sack and a strip, and you had Nick Bosa looking like Defensive Player of the Year. This is a tough assignment for Tampa Bay. They will try to get Rashawn White obviously going. He did a nice job catching the football out of the backfield. But when I look at the Niners, it was interesting. They were trying to get McCaffrey that touchdown to keep his streak going. But when I look at the Niners, they look like they're back, and Brock Purdy was very efficient against Jacksonville, and they just dominated them. So I think at home, I think that San Francisco wins this one.
Yeah, if you're looking at matchup for the defense, Tampa Bay versus San Fran right now, San Fran's defense definitely a lot better. Even the offense is clicking on cylinders, like you said. So, yeah, I also will take the Niners over the Bucks.
All right. You have Sunday Night Football. This is a big game, and it's not because of the personnel or anything, but the Vikings are hottest team in the National Football League. They won 5 straight. They're going to Denver. Denver is playing right now. They're trying to compete against a tough Bills team. I think Madison has a concussion for the Vikings, and Denver's defense is tougher than people think. But I'll go with Minnesota, another close one, and the magic carpet ride of Josh Dobbs continues.
Yep, I agree. Minnesota right now is kind of a hot team in the NFL. Josh Dobbs, I think, has all the confidence. So does Minnesota standing behind him. So I will agree. I, too, will take the Vikings over the Broncos.
Yeah. And then the big one in Monday Night Football, this is a revenge game. All my Eagles folks have been talking all week. I already started listening to the radio. They're saying we're getting revenge on this. That PI penalty there's ticky-tacky, there's about the Super Bowl and all that. And then, bleep Andy. Pat Mahomes can go away, saltier language of that. But the Eagles are and Jalen Hurts, they're coming off a bye. They're going to be a lot more refreshed. They probably won't have Goddard, who had surgery on that wrist. But other than that, they should have their full complement of guys and pretty healthy. They're going into Kansas City. The only thing with this Eagles team that kind of worries me is over the middle. And Travis Kelce, you're going to have to watch him in this one. Taylor Swift being in the building, obviously. I'm going to go with Kansas City in a close win. I'll go like 31-27.
All right. I almost feel like KC obviously is going to try and take care of business and show the rematch and hush everybody from what was said out there in Arizona. But to me, I think the Eagles right now, that momentum that they're carrying, and they know if they want to get back, this is the road that they have to go through. There's no detour. You got to run straight through KC. So for me, I'll take the Eagles. I'll take the Eagles by 1, if that.
Yeah, it's going to be. You got 2 good kickers, and it's a great matchup. And this is Jalen Hurts' spot to shut all the people. And it was fun to listen to Chris say, talk about him in that echelon with Mahomes and Burrow, because I do agree that he can, in terms of play, that he can play with those guys and be mentioned in that ilk. So, I think ESPN's probably extremely happy to finally have a good matchup. We saw, as I was saying when Chris was on, some real stinkers in terms of Thursday night football and that game over in Germany. So we'll see. And we're very excited, though, for week 11 and a lot more to talk about. I'm working on a Philly guy for next week. I think I got him. I'll announce it after I confirm everything up. But he's a former Philadelphia Daily News writer, and he definitely will probably want to talk about that game. So it should be fun to talk about. But yeah, another great week here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. Again, thank you to our featured guest. He was awesome. Chris Allen. He's a fantasy football analyst, but man, he knew everything. So he's from Fantasy Life. Check their stuff out. I also think he is on Peacock on their main show, the fantasy football show there. So we appreciate him coming on. I appreciate Angel jumping on and the great job he did on the 1s and 2s as usual, producing this show. And we'll catch you next week. Thanks for joining Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game and the Broad Street South Network.